There's a new batch of leaks about Apple's so-called iPhone 17e and Apple Watch Series 11 blowing up online. But if you actually read them carefully, a lot of it simply doesn't add up. In this video, I'm going to break down exactly what these iPhone 17e leaks are claiming, why so many of the details don't match Apple's real strategy or history, and what you should actually expect from Apple's future budget iPhones and Apple Watch models. If you've seen headlines about a $599 iPhone 17e with flagship specs, in-house Apple modems, MagSafe, and 5G Apple Watches, stay tuned because this story is not as solid as it first appears. Let's start by summarizing what this viral leak is claiming. According to the report, Apple is working on a cheaper iPhone 17 model called the iPhone 17e, a more powerful series with major upgrades. An iPhone 17e that's supposedly on par with the standard iPhone 17 in terms of processing power, Apple's own proprietary cellular and Wi-Fi chips inside this budget iPhone MagSafe. Wireless charging finally coming to the cheaper model. A launch price of $599 or £599, with no price increase over the previous iPhone 16e. A September event where Apple unveils the full iPhone 17 lineup. iPhone 17, iPhone 17 Pro, iPhone 17 Pro Max, and a brand new, ultra-thin iPhone Air at just 5.6 millimeters, and on top of that, Apple Watch Series 11 with 5G new health tracking, satellite features for Apple Watch Ultra 3, and an updated Apple Watch Series 3 with always-on display and 5G starting at $249 on paper. That sounds exciting. Budget iPhone 17 with flagship power, Apple's own modem, MagSafe, a crazy thin iPhone Air, 5G Apple Watches. It's basically a wish list for Apple fans. But there's a big problem. When you compare these claims against Apple's real-world behavior and actual credible leaks, this story starts to fall apart. First red flag, the name iPhone 17e and the mention of an iPhone 16e. Apple has never used an E suffix in its iPhone lineup. We've had iPhone, say iPhone Mini, iPhone Plus iPhone, Pro and Pro Max, but no iPhone 16e has ever existed in Apple's lineup, according to any reputable leak or launch history. If Apple wanted a cheaper version of a main iPhone, they already have a name for it. The iPhone say, the iPhone say, the SA branding is well known. It's tied to special edition or small edition, and it fits their strategy for budget models perfectly. So, when a leak suddenly claims Apple secretly launched an iPhone 16e and is now working on an iPhone 17e, with zero trace of this naming, incredible reports from people like Mark Gurman, Ming-Chi Kuo, or other trusted sources, that's a huge red flag. It suggests the author either doesn't understand Apple's naming history or is simply inventing a product line that doesn't exist. Second red flag, flagship level performance at a budget price. The leak claims that the iPhone 17e will use a processor on par with the standard iPhone 17, ship at $599/£599, with no price increase, still be classified as the more budget-friendly model. This goes directly against how Apple normally segments its lineup. Look at what Apple usually does. The main iPhone models, like iPhone 15, 16, 17, get the LATEST chip or a near-latest chip. The cheaper models, like the iPhone SE, use older hardware. For example, older chips, older displays, or older designs to keep costs down. Apple's entire strategy is about upselling you. If you want the newest chip and the best performance, you move up the lineup and pay more. If you want a lower price, you accept older hardware, giving a $599 iPhone 17e the same level of performance as the main iPhone 17 would cannibalize Apple's own sales. Why would anyone pay more for the regular iPhone 17 if the 17e has the same power, MagSafe, and Apple's new chips at a significantly lower price? That doesn't match Apple's usual pricing strategy at all. Is it possible Apple could slightly blur the lines and offer strong performance in a cheaper model? Sure, but a one-to-one spec match at $599 feels highly unlikely, especially when Apple has shown zero interest in racing to the bottom on price. Third red flag: Apple's own cellular modem and Wi-Fi chips in a budget iPhone. The leak claims that the iPhone 17 East will feature Apple's proprietary cellular chips, Apple's own Wi-Fi silicon now. Apple has been working for years on creating its own 5G modem to replace Qualcomm's. That part is true. There have been many reports that Apple has hit delays and serious engineering challenges in this area. Even major outlets like Bloomberg and others have said repeatedly, Apple's in-house modem is behind schedule and might not make it into iPhones as early as originally hoped, if and when Apple finally ships its own 5G modem, the very first place they will use it is almost certainly their mainstream flagship iPhones, not a side brand budget model in untested name. Apple would want their new in-house modem to launch on the biggest stage possible, with the most control over marketing and messaging, probably with the Pro models or the entire flagship lineup. Releasing it quietly inside a cheaper iPhone 17e first doesn't make strategic sense. The same goes for Wi-Fi. Apple already uses a mix of in-house and third-party wireless solutions, but any huge shift to a fully proprietary cellular and Wi-Fi stack would be a major architectural change. Again, that's something you debut on your core iPhone lineup, not an experimental budget phone. Fourth red flag: MagSafe on the cheap iPhone is actually the most believable part, but it doesn't prove the rest. One of the more reasonable claims is that the iPhone 17 East will finally add MagSafe wireless charging. This is actually believable. Apple has been slowly standardizing MagSafe across its phones and accessories. Bringing MagSafe down to a cheaper model at some point is plausible and fits Apple's ecosystem strategy. But here's the catch. Just because one part of a leak sounds believable, that doesn't magically make the entire story true. A smart fake leak often mixes one or two realistic upgrades with a bunch of exaggerated or impossible claims. So yes, MagSafe on a cheaper iPhone at some point, that could realistically happen. But pairing that with an all-new name, brand new, Apple modem, flagship level performance at a budget price, and a long list of future products described as if they already launched. That combination is what makes this leak suspicious. Fifth red flag: the September 2025 iPhone 17 event described like it already happened. The text going around talks about Apple's September 2025 event in the past tense, saying, in September 2025, Apple unveiled its iPhone 17 lineup. It lists the iPhone 17, iPhone 17 Pro, iPhone 17 Pro Max. It even describes an iPhone Air at just 5.6mm thick. This is not how real leaks are written. Real leaks talk about Apple is expected to unveil. Rumors suggest Apple may launch. Analysts predict Apple could introduce. They don't describe a future event as if it already happened, with exact product names, exact thickness numbers, and every single detail neatly wrapped up. That's a classic sign you're reading pure speculation, or even AI-generated text, instead of legitimate insider information. Let's talk about the iPhone Air for a second. An iPhone that's only 5.6mm thick sounds impressive, but it raises serious questions. Where do you put a big enough battery? How do you manage heat from a powerful A-series chip in a body that thin? How do you fit advanced cameras, 5G antennas, and MagSafe coils without major compromises? Apple can make devices incredibly thin. Look at the MacBook Air and iPad Air. But even those products are not chasing thinner at all costs anymore. Recent Apple design trends actually focus more on battery life, camera improvements, and durability than on shaving off fractions of a millimeter. Could Apple eventually use the Air branding for a phone? It's possible in theory, But no credible leaks from established sources have indicated that an iPhone Air is on the roadmap, let alone with a specific 5.6 millimeters thickness. Sixth red flag: Apple Watch Series 11 with 5G and satellite connectivity. The rumor also claims Apple Watch Series 11 will feature 5G connectivity. Apple Watch Ultra 3 will support satellite connectivity. The new Apple Watch Series 3 will get an always-on display, a faster processor, and 5G support starting at $249.